Sergeant Retired Cardi Murray, and remain standing for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance by Father Bill Muller, President of Bourbon Day High School.
Colors, attention! Carry, cut! Right, left! Half step, march! 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One time, march. 1, 2, 3, 4. Colors, halt. Left, right. Reset, on.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we pray Thanksgiving for this Rotary year. We pray Thanksgiving for our Rotary leadership, both outgoing and incoming. But mostly today, let us pray Thanksgiving for Megan. This is a poem, the end of a poem, one of Robert Frost's famous poems. And I chose it as our blessing and invocation for Megan because I think this is who she is. But yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes. God bless you, Megan. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Father Bill. I'm thrilled to introduce a very special guest and singer extraordinaire, Megan McConnell, who graced us with her beautiful voice at the President's Ball. My sincere thanks to Janet Dowd and Megan's mother, Maureen, who helped arrange this special performance of our national anthem today. Megan has performed in operas, operettas, musical theater, classical and contemporary theater productions around the U.S. and has studied voice with Virginia Doria, Renee Sousa, and distinguished opera coach William Vendies. She will be accompanied on the piano today by Stan Augustine, CFO of the House Ear Clinic. Please welcome Megan and Stan.
What so proudly we hail
Megan, and stand for that inspiring rendition of our national anthem.
Right, face. Us, left, right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Please be seated. Well, it is wonderful to look around this room and be surrounded by so many great friends today. But I feel especially blessed to have my loved ones here, and it is my pleasure to introduce them. I'd like to introduce my husband, Stephen O'Rourke. My parents, Ben and Sherry Tennell. And my dear friend and Beverly Hills Rotarian, Vanessa McLean. Thank you all for being here. And now I'd like to welcome our club secretary, Sumi Kawaratani, MD, to the rostrum.
Thank you, President Baker. It is my pleasure to introduce our special guests today. Please stand and be recognized. Our distinguished speaker, the Honorable Debra Bowen, California Secretary of State. Her Assistant Deputy Director, Carrie Jett. And Kathy Gallardo, Vice President of Development, St. Anne's. In addition, we are honored to have many distinguished leaders from our club and District 5280 joining us to celebrate today. I'd like to ask all LA5 past presidents to stand as a group and be recognized. All past presidents. Thank you for the service to LA. And I know that our District Governor Brad Robinson is here. District Governor-elect Lou Bertrand. And District Governor nominee Jim Dyer. And can we also have all the past district governors in the audience stand and be recognized at this time? Do we have any visiting Rotarians today? If so, please stand, tell us your name, the name of your club, and whether or not you have a flag to exchange. All visiting Rotarians.
I'm Peter Laddick. I'm the president-elect of the Rotary Club of Downtown Los Angeles. And no, I don't have a flag to exchange. But it's good to be here among all my old friends.
Glad to see you, Peter.
Alan Kriegenthal, Rotary Club of North Hollywood. Very Northwest.
Thank you for sharing your Rotary with us. Anyone else?
Hi, Vanessa McLean, a member of Beverly Hills Rotary Club, and so happy to be here. I don't know how to.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Would all guests and their hosts please stand and be recognized at this time? All guests and their hosts. The 50/50 tickets are being circulated around the room. A single ticket is drawn at the end of the meeting to determine the winner. Half the proceeds go to the club, and the other half goes to the Lucky's Bucket winner. Please buy your tickets now. Please place your lunch ticket on the table in front of you for your waiter to collect. Turn off those cell phones. They may not be used here either in the Jonathan Club, and it's still a $50 fine if yours goes off during our meeting. The Foundation Board of Directors will meet immediately after our luncheon in the Huntington Room on the 4th floor. Back to you, President Megan.
Thank you, Sumi. You've done a tremendous job as club secretary this year. Let's give Sumi a big round of applause. your clinic, please escort Mystica Garcia, owner of Special Occasions Event Planning LLC, and Manisha Javeri, professor and former LA5 World Peace Scholar, to the rostrum. As you all know, sponsoring a new member is the first part of LA5's four-way test, and I'm very pleased to introduce two new members today. Thank you, Frank, for sponsoring Mystica, and Stan for sponsoring Manisha into our club. Mystica, please take a minute to tell us about yourself and why you've chosen to join LA5.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Mystica Garcia. Thank you. And I am being sponsored by Frank Acevedo. The reason I'm here is because I've heard stories from him, as well as other colleagues, about volunteering they've done, community service, train rides, a variety of things. And it really perks my interest. I know these are really busy people, and if they take time out of their lives and their businesses to participate in something, then I got more interested in it. Frank was kind enough to bring me to a few great speakers, and here I am. So I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone and to finding stuff to get involved in, committees to be on, and see where this new adventure takes me. So thank you.
Thank you, Mystica. Now, Manisha, please take a minute to tell us about why you've chosen to join LA5 and about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manisha Javeri, and I would like to first thank a few people who have actually helped me to be a part of Rotary Club. Steiner Dwighton, Stan Augustine, who actually was my mentor. I received the World Peace Fellow Award in 2010, and I was representing LA5 in Thailand. The reason I'm joining the Rotary, I'd like to share a little story. I grew up in India, in Bombay, and I went to a British school. We were asked to write an essay when I was in the 3rd grade or 4th grade, I believe, on who would you like to become when you grow up. And my first, the only one in my class, I wrote an essay saying I want to be a social worker. And I think I was laughed at by everyone because everyone in my class wanted to be a doctor and engineer, and especially growing up in India, everyone wants to be a doctor and engineer. Of course at home my father also told me that's not a profession, you do not do that for a living. And I wish he was here today because I can tell him I've joined one of the biggest club in the Rotary Club, and even though I'm not going to do that for my living, it is going to be my life from now on. Thank you.
Thank you both, and welcome to LA5. Excuse me, the pins were not attached. Your sponsors, Frank and Stan, will now pay you with the Distinguished Rotary Pin, worn by 1.3 million Rotarians in 34,000 Rotary clubs in over 200 countries worldwide. Along with your commitment to Rotary, I hope you both will commit to passing LA5's four-way test this year by sponsoring a new member, joining a committee, being a donor, and doing business with a Rotarian. We all look forward to your friendship and your service through Rotary. Please join me in a warm LA5 welcome for our newest members, Mystica Garcia and Manisha Javeri. Frank and Stan, before you are seated, I would like to invite Ken Chong, John Miller, and Florence Chung to join us at the rostrum.
Busted.
Well, we've had a wonderful group of new members join our club this year, and while we couldn't introduce all of our new members at this last meeting, I did want to recognize everyone that has successfully completed the LA5 four-way test this year. Each of you on this stage has sponsored a new member, served on a committee, been a donor, and done business with the Rotarian. It is my pleasure to award you all with your number 4 stickers. I hope you will wear them proudly on your name badge as a symbol of your outstanding commitment to our club. Please join me in a round of applause for Frank Acevedo, Stan Augustine, Ken Chong, John Miller, and Florence Chung. Thank you all very much. Ken just told me he would wear it proudly for an hour. Until the badge is ever placed for chasing. And now it's my pleasure to invite the following people to please join me at the rostrum for a special presentation. My husband, Stephen O'Rourke, Executive Director John Gibby, Executive Administrator Jennifer Gregg. You better tell Jennifer, she's coming, I see you. Penny Von Kalinowski, Rita Lee, Steve Summers, Zaina Baji, and I'm not sure if David Takakawa is here, but David, if you're here, please join me as well. Come on up. I am very honored to present a number of Paul Harris Fellows today. Stephen, John, and Jennifer don't know about this, but it is the tradition in our club that the president's spouse be made a Paul Harris Fellow in recognition of the tremendous sacrifices they make throughout the year in the name of our club. And it's my great pleasure to make Stephen a Paul Harris Fellow today. In addition, the board felt that due to the incredible work and outstanding commitment that John and Jennifer have both demonstrated to our club over the past 2 years, that we would also like to honor them with Paul Harris Awards. Please give them a round of applause. The Paul Harris Fellowship is named for Paul Harris, who founded Rotary with 3 business associates in Chicago in 1905. The fellowship was established in his honor in 1957 to express appreciation for a $1,000 contribution to the humanitarian and education programs of the Rotary Foundation. Rotarians may also designate a Paul Harris Fellow to recognize another person whose life demonstrates a shared purpose with the mission of the Rotary Foundation, to build world understanding and peace. We move closer to a more peaceful world today as each of you becomes a Paul Harris Fellow. Your selfless and generous contributions to Rotary help eliminate suffering, improve living conditions, and provide educational opportunities for young people around the world. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to present you the 2 emblems of a Paul Harris Fellow, the certificate for first-time fellows and lapel pins for everyone. Please accept our congratulations and sincere appreciation for your commitment to our common goals of world understanding and peace. My fellow Rotarians and guests, please join me in congratulating our newest Paul Harris Fellow. Oh, Reiko Sakata, are you here? Reiko, I'm so sorry. You were to have been invited as well. I apologize. Please join us at the rostrum. That's John's fault. Please join us in a final round of applause. Congratulations. I'd like to invite LA5 Director and my good friend, Arthur Cassell, CEO of Flexicizer International, to please join me at the rostrum. Art has yet again secured another outstanding speaker for our club today. Please take a minute to introduce us to Secretary of State, Debra Bowen.
I will do that. I would like to take a minute and just introduce a friend of mine who's been here a couple of times, Percy Pinckney. Percy, will you stand up, please? Percy is field deputy to Dianne Feinstein, and he and I worked together for the first administration of Jerry Brown, the current administration of Jerry Brown, and he is a very, very close friend of our Secretary of State, and he made it a point to be here today because he wanted to honor her. So I just wanted to thank you, Percy, for being here. My late wife, Teaching Wilkerson Cassell, owned the Hollywood Reporter and had Parkinson's eventually, and it became very difficult for her to do things. And one of the things she did when she had the Hollywood Reporter, she was a champion of women's issues. And owning the Hollywood Reporter gave her a tremendous pulpit and a power base so that she was able to drive women through the glass ceiling, because when she started in '72 on that quest, she created Women in Film. And women did not have, they were executive secretaries, very little, no producers, very few behind the camera, which is interesting because in the old days of Mary Pickford, things were different, but that changed rapidly and dramatically. And the corollary of what I want to say is that our Secretary of State is only the 6th woman to be elected as a constitutional officer in the state. And so aside from, there's a lot of synergy going in the way I feel about things, but she has helped women's causes, and she's a recognized icon as a champion for all those that need help. And she was recognized by the John F. Kennedy family, and she shares that same award, not the same award, but with several people, but John McCain, sorry about that. And I just want to say that it's an honor for me to have her as a friend and for her to be here today. And I would have her resume, but it's 9 pages, so I'm not going to do that. Debra, is she going to come up now? Megan? Okay, so what do I'm not going to come back, so do I want to do this? Okay. Man, come on, Debra. Last 2 weeks ago, it was the last week, Donald Sterling was our speaker. And I also was instrumental in helping secure him as a speaker. He's a friend of mine for a long time. And he made a commitment and said, I want to make a donation of $5,000 to Rotary. And a lot of people here didn't believe that, because that's the way things sometimes happen. So I have here his check to Rotary for $5,000. To do that, and before I get off here, I was with some people the other day, and I saw a Rotary pin that looked like it had a lot of diamonds around it. And so I just thought that you would like that, so
Thank you very much, and thank you for the short introduction. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to join all of you today for the changing of the guard at the Rotary Club of Los Angeles. Congratulations to Megan O'Rourke. I understand that you are the youngest president of this club ever, and I know that, well, I actually have a little history with Rotary. I had a Rotary scholarship and went to Japan in 1975. I don't think Art knew that, but one of the reasons that I never say no when I'm asked to speak at a Rotary Club is I have something to give back and I want to pay it forward. So, but your accomplishments are really impressive, and in particular the more than $200,000 in scholarships that you have awarded to 80 students. I think that should be a source of pride to every club member, and it's that kind of work that's part of the reason I have such a special place in my heart for Rotary. I can guarantee you that I will not be writing a check for $5,000. Not if I want to stay married. And political spouses should have an award too, because they put up with a lot. I have a passion for democracy. And I am not entirely sure how I came by it. I did grow up in a family where politics was discussed regularly, and everybody, my family all voted regularly. My mother and grandmother used to have big political arguments over the telephone. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois. It was over at the Civic Center. My grandmother would say, well, they are doing this and they are doing that. My mother would say, Mom, who's they? We are they. And it usually ended up with them hanging up on each other, or passionate arguments. My mother, really I don't think ever did get the point across to my grandmother that it is something we decide. We decide. There is no they. It is us. We're the ones who decide. And elections are just this incredible innovation in the history of humankind. When we traded bullets for ballots, we decided that they would not exchange power by having bloody conflicts, but instead we would go to the polls. And we have now a couple of centuries plus of orderly transitions of power that are really extraordinary and unprecedented in the history of civilization. And I think it's useful to stand back and think about that every once in a while, because we really kind of take it for granted. And it's difficult for me when I watch a turnout that's just a little above 30%, which it was just in this most recent primary. And that right after we've all watched the Arab Spring and watched people dying in the streets in their countries in order to secure the right to choose their own governance and to secure the blessings of liberty. When I hear the Pledge of Allegiance, I always hear that phrase with liberty and justice for all. It just rings for me. And it is, I think, my little version of the four-way test, which, by the way, is something that I've known about and kept for a long time. I used to have that little flag on my desk when I was in the assembly. And it's great to have that. So, I didn't ever intend to run for office. I got involved in politics by joining Neighborhood Watch in 1986 or 87. And when I go speak to Neighborhood Watch groups now, I warn them, be careful. You don't know what might happen. And what happened was I started getting involved with various development issues, public safety issues, and that took me into watching what was going on with both cities and the county and then the state, and I look at the members of the legislature and think to myself, I could do at least that well. I could do that well blindfolded. And I was too naive to know that you didn't just run for a seat in the assembly, so I just ran in 1992 after redistricting and won. And it's just been... It is such an honor, and it is such a joy to be able to encounter a problem. As an example, I became aware in the late 90s that various government agencies and banks and private institutions were using people's social security number as a public identifier. And we were seeing a major increase in identity theft, and the social security number was the source of that. And I sat down with my staff and said, all right, how can we help people, stop people from becoming victims of identity theft? And the first answer was, well, we have to stop using the Social Security number as a public identifier. And after about 2 years, California passed a bill that prohibited the use of the Social Security number as a public identifier. We became the first state anywhere in the country to do that. And that law has been copied in many other states, and ultimately even the federal government often gets around to doing something like that. But to be able to do something like that you know is going to create a framework that will mean things work better for citizens. And there were many, many examples, but it's really incredible. Now as Secretary of State, probably the role that people are most familiar with is that of Chief Elections Officer. And ultimately, my decision to run for Secretary of State was driven by the challenges that this country had encountered in Florida in 2000 and then in Ohio in 2004. And I wasn't particularly interested in who was right or who was wrong. I was very interested in solving the problem and putting it behind us, because I was very concerned that questions about the integrity of our voting system could completely undermine democracy and make people mistrustful and unwilling to participate in the electoral process. And there's certainly precedent for that. We see that in other countries where there are questions about the integrity of elections. And, you know, I did grow up outside Chicago. So the slogan, of course, was vote early and often. And I have learned in the last few years how you hack a lever voting machine, which is what we use in Chicago. You know, who's seen a lever voting machine here? You people generally familiar? It's a physical, huge thing. It's like an upright piano, and it has a gear for each contest, and you literally move a lever for every contest you're going to vote in. And when you finish, you pull this big lever, and it turns each of the gears physically, and that records the vote. And if you want to mess with the results, you can take a number 2 pencil and just stick it in the gear where you would like to suppress the vote. And that gear will not turn fully when the lever is pulled. And by the end of the day, the number 2 pencil is pretty much gone. And all you have to do is be behind the machine for, I don't know, 2 seconds? How long does it take to stick a little pencil in something? So, you know, as long as there have been elections, I'm sure there have been attempts made for people to win elections by means other than securing the majority of the vote. I'm sure that when cavemen decided, oh, let's have an election, and a pile of black rocks and a pile of white rocks, there was somebody trying to get a few extra rocks in the pile before they were counted. And, you know, we all learn in about 4th grade, when we have an election for class president, that the person who is running shouldn't be the person who's counting the votes. Right? I think it was Stalin who said, you know, it's not the voting that matters, it's the counting. Or the golf equivalent of that, which is, it's not how you play the game, it's who has the pencil. But of course, with golf, it doesn't matter unless you're playing tournament. Although you might lose a 6-pack of beer. But my goal has been to put the controversy about elections behind us, and then to set out a system of improving elections so that in every election cycle we look at what went right and we look at what went wrong, and we learn from mistakes that are made by others. And if there's an issue that comes up in one county, I want to make sure that it never comes up in any of the other 57 counties, because we all are aware of it and learn from it. And it's basically the same concept as a business with a continuous improvement cycle. And I've also initiated what's really become an entire new academic discipline, which is auditing of elections. Believe it or not, there was never any scientific work looking at the auditing of elections. We have a whole discipline about auditing public companies and auditing governments and auditing high-speed rail authorities and what have you. But nobody's ever really looked at auditing elections and how many ballots do you need to look at and from where and how do you set it up so that you are 99.999% certain that you have the right result, and you spend the absolute smallest number of resources to do that. So in other words, you don't want to have to recount every ballot if you can create a sampling mechanism that gives you the same results. So we're in the process of creating that and have yet another project going to do some risk limiting audits in this election, and we've got about 8 counties participating. And there's just a lot of very interesting things going on in the very arcane field of election administration, which is something that most people don't think about. We just hope that it is all done in an honorable way, and that when the vote is announced, we're actually swearing in the person who got the right vote, the majority of the votes. And I am very sure in California that when I announce the results of an election, I am telling you who got the majority of the vote in that election. So in order to do that, we did have to stop using some forms of voting equipment. We stopped using touchscreen voting systems because we could not be certain that there hadn't been tampering. and we didn't have any way to audit. If you ask a computer, take a look again at that race, it's just going to give you exactly the same result that it gave you the last time. So we are using an old, boring, reliable, cheap system of voting. It's the fill-in-the-bubble system that we all use for standardized tests, and it gives us ballots that we can look at that are the original intent of the voter. Now, I have no doubt that if we're willing to spend an unlimited amount of money, that we could create an electronic voting system that would be reliable. But it's very hard to audit because the ballot is secret, and that's the source of the problem. If you compare it to ATM transactions, for example, there's a counterparty in an ATM transaction. There's somebody who's looking at the other side of it saying, hey bank, that was a $200 deposit and you credited me $20. In elections, there's no way for the voter to do that. And in fact, you can't know how anybody voted. So it's actually a big challenge. So it's been a real pleasure to work on that, and it has also been a pleasure to work on something that is one of my biggest priorities, which is to increase the number of young people who are registered to vote, and indeed the number of people who are registered. And we are on track to roll out in California online voter registration around Labor Day of this year. You should never have to fill out a form, figure out what the postage is for something of that size, and mail it in. If you have a driver's license or an ID card, we'll be able to use the signature from the DMV files. So we're doing the work right now to make that work and to provide the security that's necessary to do that. And it's very exciting because if I just take LA County alone, there is a room bigger than this one that is filled with people for the 6 weeks or so before an election who do nothing but look at voter registration cards and retype the information that is on the card into a computer, which is a truly insane thing to do in the year 2012. And it simply adds errors into the cycle. And then there's one person whose sole job is, she's basically an archaeologist. Her job is to try to piece together information from damaged voter registration forms, something that went through the mailing equipment a little wrong. We all got something like that, a third of a letter with a nice note from the post office saying, sorry about that. Anyway, her job is to try to figure out enough information about whoever it was that tried to register to be able to contact them and let them know that they counted only got about a quarter of their form. And much of that should go away. So that's going to be a huge step towards cost reduction, accuracy in records, and in the long run, the ability to track who is on the rolls in which county in a much more accurate way at a much lower cost. And given where we are with the budget, that's really what we all have to be doing anyways, looking at ways to provide a better service at a lower cost. And but we do that by using computers, and the Secretary of State's office was woefully behind. The other place where I've had a lot of work to do in that regard is business filings, and I think probably many of you have interacted with my office. During the difficult days of the budget, we were told that we could no longer pay overtime or hire part-time workers. And our turnaround time for business filings went from 10 days to 120 days. Because the office runs on students who work part-time, and we have busy times of year and not so busy times of year, and it's just more efficient to pay overtime than it is to hire people who don't have much to do for 6 months out of the year or 8 months out of the year. So we've been changing that. We're now back down to 40 days for business filings, and we are going out to bid with a computer system that will allow us to do most of our business filings online. It takes much too long to do that, but it is in the works and it will be done. And it will also enable us to provide another level of service to businesses We will be able to use the same kind of modeling that banks and credit card companies use to identify potential fraud situations and send a notice, probably an email to the business letting them know that there's been some unusual activity. This is the kind of thing you get if you file a change of address with the post office or you change your password. You'll get an email saying, you just changed your Google password. If you actually did this, ignore this. If you didn't, you might want to call us. And we will be able to do that in situations where we know that there's a high risk that there may be criminal activity. A change of address to a private mailbox and a change of officers and agents can signal that somebody has taken over a corporation and is using it for less than honorable purposes. And if we have a ready way to contact people in that situation, we can actually be of assistance in another way to California businesses. So it's exciting to be able to do that. So what I do on a daily basis is a mix of highly technical stuff, overseeing computer development projects, and then doing things like administering the high school student mock election. And we had over 250,000 high school students participate in the last election cycle. We'll be doing that again. It's so important for us to get high school students involved and registered in voting. We know that if you vote for the first time in that first cycle after you're 18, you are much more likely to become a person who votes on a regular basis. So, and we also know that if you learn it at home, that's the best, but not all families have that tradition, and that means we need to find another way to reach young people for who don't come from families where voting is a tradition, sometimes because they came from a country where there wasn't voting. We have a large number of Laotian refugees. They didn't vote in their previous country. And so we have to come in and help fill that in and make sure that people understand what's at stake, the importance of it. And as I go out and talk to high school students, I always tell them, you all hire me. I have a very interesting job interview with 17 million people. Strangest job interview you can imagine. But it's up to the people of the state of California who to hire to do the various things that need to be done. And that's the power that we have collectively, and the number of times that it's really close is larger than you might imagine. There are always a couple of races where we don't know for several weeks after Election Day, as we're dealing with the vote-by-mail ballots that come in on Election Day, or provisional ballots, which are our fail-safe system, so that if we have a problem with the database, we've got a way for people not to be disenfranchised if there's a problem with the record keeping. And of course, there's never a problem with government records, right? So I'm pretty humble about it. We need to find ways to make sure that people have ready opportunities to register and to vote. And if you are interested in your business in participating, I've started a project called Democracy at Work. And what we do is provide basically information to the participants that they can put in a newsletter either to employees or to clients or customers, reminding them what the deadline is to register to vote, what the deadline is to request a vote-by-mail ballot, information about the hotline number to find their polling place, and various other things like that. It's just nonpartisan reminders, because the single most important factor for somebody who's on the fence and may not vote is to have somebody ask them to vote. So you actually can help just by asking people, are you planning to vote? You don't have to, I certainly learned that you don't talk about politics or religion unless you already know. But asking people if they're going to vote, and it really does make a difference, and particularly with young people. We have a very interesting trend with our under 30 voters who are increasingly registering as decline to state party preference. So it's going to be interesting to see. We've got a couple of experiments underway with the top 2 primary and with now redistricting, and we'll see what happens. This is our first go-around with the redistricting commission, something that's supported by the legislature. And you know, the thing about democracy is if we don't like the results, we can change them. And if we don't like the way the rules are working, or we don't like the way it's set up, we have an obligation to go to change it, to fix it, to make it work. And that goes for everything. Everything, there's a big code. And it keeps getting bigger. But part of the reason is that we have something like a wiretapping law. And when it's created, it says that you can't tap a phone, and it has to be really specific. You can't splice it into the wire. Then somebody invents cordless phones. Well, you have to go revise the law because it doesn't apply to intercepting a conversation on a cordless phone. Then we get cellular phones. And the way it was written to cover cordless phones doesn't cover cell phones. And you have to go back in and change it again. So technology is really amazing, and it is driving a lot of the changes in our law. I mean, who would have imagined that some of the laws, some of the issues that we would be grappling with that come from our changes in technology. So it's a huge pleasure to be so deeply involved in that, and I am. Certainly this is not what I thought I would do, or not what I did for 13 years after I finished law school at the University of Virginia, which Thomas Jefferson started after he left the presidency because he didn't think democracy would survive if people weren't educated. So perhaps it was that experience of Thomas Jefferson looking down at the UVA Law School from Monticello that ultimately did me and caused me to abandon my lucrative career in the large law firm and run for the state assembly in 1992. I wouldn't have it any other way. I have loved it. So, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope I threw back a little bit over the curtain so that you can understand a little bit better some of what happens. And if there are time for questions, I'm happy.
We can take one or two. Yes, Don Crawford.
I read about a week ago that there were still 400,000 ballots uncounted, and that obviously affects the cigarette tax issue.
Yes.
How many ballots still are uncounted? How come it takes so long, and what's the latest as far as the cigarette tax?
I actually don't know. I haven't looked in the past couple of days. I actually don't take a position on any initiative, and I don't campaign for any or endorse any correspondence. It goes with not endorsing. But so I don't know. I just didn't look, quite honestly. But the reason it takes so long is because so many Californians drop their ballots off at the polling place on election day. And we actually compare the signature on a vote-by-mail ballot with the signature on a voter registration card for every single ballot. And that takes some time. So ballots that come in 2-3 days before are usually ready to be processed already on election day. Ballots that come in on election day have to be processed after that. And then there are the provisional ballots that come in where we have to determine if somebody is or is not a registered voter in that district, or we have to make sure that if they came in saying, I lost my vote-by-mail ballot, that we didn't already get their vote-by-mail ballot, because I'm happy to have everybody vote once, but nobody gets to vote twice.
Thank you very much for joining us. There's been a lot of discussion regarding the loosening or tightening of voter identification. Can you give us your viewpoint on your personal views and where you think California is headed?
Sure. I'm most concerned about identifying people when they register to vote, and that's part of the reason that I'm so interested in having the voter registration linked to the driver's license database, because we have a positive identification of drivers through a birth certificate or other form of identification when they get their driver's license. We basically have no history of people voting in person impersonating someone else. It's a felony. The little old ladies who are poll workers, and it's mostly women, and the average age is 77. That's why we're trying to get high school students in every polling place. They tend to know the people in their neighborhood, so you'd have to have a fairly large conspiracy, people willing to commit a felony to impact an election. The bigger concern, I think, should be with vote by mail ballots, but that's the reason that we compare the signatures. And the more we can link our records to other records and compare to other records, I think the better off we will be. But throughout the country, there just really isn't a history of people impersonating someone else. I know that's not true in some other countries. We did discover, after a study, that there were about 600 people who were regularly voting in both Arizona and Colorado. Want to guess who they were? Sunbirds. Those scofflaws, arrest them immediately. They have two homes. And I don't know, I think some of them may have voted one place in one election and another in another, but you can only vote and be registered in one place at a time. So we have some education to do, and in the long run, I think we need a system that allows us to compare our database with databases in other states. It's the same kind of system that allows California to reflect on my record that I got a speeding ticket on 29 North going from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C. It's the only speeding ticket I've gotten in the last 20 years. That system compares across state boundaries, and it is a voluntary system run by motor vehicle administrators, and the secretaries of state are moving towards a system like that that gives us a voluntary way to compare data. And what we find is that if we contact a voter and say, we got information that you're living in Texas now, they call us back and say, yes, I am. I should be off the California rolls. Thank you so much for contacting me. So we just need to do the work, and we're finding better and better ways to do that. I'd like to go to a zero error rate on our rolls.
Thank you so much for being our speaker today, Secretary Bowen. In honor of your presentation, a $1,000 donation has been made in your name to LA5 Scholarship Fund. The donation will enable a deserving high school student to achieve their dream of a college education. On behalf of our members and all of the students that will benefit from your generosity, we thank you very much for being our speaker today. Residential. Ken, you have done an incredible job and a very
sent out a member satisfaction survey, and we got the results back. I think it was 99% of you are satisfied with your membership in LA5. There was like 86% of you felt comfortable complaining to the executive committee about issues. I think that number's higher, but we'll see. There's always that margin of error. I just want to give a recap of what we've done this year as a club, what we've accomplished. Secretary Bowen talked about the thing that I'm most proud about, $216,000, a record high for scholarships. 18 international projects deployed all over the world, including Myanmar, Ecuador, South Africa, doing great work all over, and it's because of your effort, your generosity, giving to Rotary International. It's fabulous. We were a club of excellence for international service. Just some other little tidbits. We doubled our Facebook followers this year. We have 308 followers in 20 different countries following what we're doing. Jane Wells of CNBC and Nevada Secretary of State Ross Miller tweeted to his 20,000 combined followers about our meeting, and I saw the conversation went back and forth with all these different people about how they were to be invited to LA5 Rotary. So I think that's amazing. Kind of where we're sitting. $50,000 in community service grants to local nonprofits. Many of whom are involved with Rotary Club as members already, but a lot of great projects, and that's directly from your contribution to our community service grants funds. I mean, how can you involved with things that we're doing? Some other things we did for the first time. We invited all of our past speakers back to come to Scholarship Day, and a number of them did because they were so honored. They wanted to meet these students. 4 students going to Harvard, 4 to UCLA, only 1 to SC. We had a couple.